nuts?
Hey, it's me. I'm back again for the 20th time in the last 3 minutes.
Isn't that really cool, guys?
Except this time we're doing things a different way. That's right, gamers. From now on, we're going to be filming everything live and directly on set from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Get in there! And make sure you've got your limited edition Hatsune Miku jelking machine in order because there's gonna be no short absence of gamer juice to be found, that's for sure.
Gaming.
So, in light of this new transition, today, we'll actually be taking another depressing look back to this silly boy. Nothing like what you see in this movie. 4 years back, I made a video titled The Problem with Ghost in the Shell 2017, where I take 10 minutes to make absolutely no point at all. Even though it would be a turning point for the quality in my videos, I'd still say it's a pretty amateurish approach to the video essay format that I've kinda grown to hate over the years. The complexity of Christopher Nolan. The Cat in the Hat. Secretly a masterpiece? Guys, have you seen Solo? Not very funny.
Ew, you nasty ass bastard!
I recently went back to it to try and give me some inspiration to push out some new videos again. All in all, it actually would be a pretty good video if it wasn't, you know, just terrible. Somewhat ironically, it just feels kind of soulless and mechanical. I'm so busy sounding pretentious that I kind of forgot to take a step back and not call the movie an intellectual experience. But hey, I might not like it that much, but what did the comments section think about the video? It's painful when you think about the fact that this one comes out after the best adaptation, Edge of Tomorrow.
Awesome-tacular.
The film wasn't even bad. Nearly 10 minutes of discussing the problems of this movie and not 1 second of it is devoted to a white actress playing an Asian character in an industry that almost never has Asian woman in a leading role. Yeah, I'm gonna give this channel a pass. Like, I'm not a political channel, what do you want me to say? Xenophobia? Ethnocentrism? Not very epic. Anyone do you remember Under the Skin? The fact that you have those drawings of yourself in this video is disgraceful. I can understand the many problems people have with this remake. It's not perfect by any means, but it isn't terrible, at least in my opinion. Although, for some reason, this movie holds an odd place in my heart. As embarrassing as it is, it introduced me to the original before its release, and I love the original a lot now. So, thanks to these absolutely lovely comments, I actually decided to revisit the movies to see how my opinion of them has changed over the last 4 years. Or see if my opinion on them has changed at all for that fact. But there's a twist. I also decided to go out and read the manga. And maybe we'll see the results of that later on. I don't know. I didn't script this video well. Can you tell that this is my first time on camera? This is great. But first off, let's go ahead and talk about the 1995 movie. The original Ghost in the Shell adaptation was released way back in 1995 to a pretty great reception that would help it blossom out into the cult classic it is today. Even if it is considered to be too high IQ for you, it still managed to become a well-recognized and influential movie that has significantly impacted media, both Eastern and Western, since its release.
Oh my Jesus.
It's considered one of the gold standards of both anime and storytelling, and for good reason. It's such a good movie that they're making a new Ghost in the Shell movie or TV show in what feels like every 2 hours. And I'm not even talking about that one. You've got Ghost in the Shell, Ghost in the Shell 2 Innocence, Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex, Ghost in the Shell 1 Gigapart Solid State Drive, Ghost in the Shell 2.0, Ghost in the Shell Arise, Ghost in the Shell The New Ghost in the Shell Alternative Media, Ghost in the Shell Ballsack. And hey, did you want a Ghost in the Shell stage play? Because you've sure as hell got one of those too. What I'm trying to say is, Ghost in the Shell is pretty epic. And while it might not be my favorite Mamoru Oshii film, that title would go to Angel's Egg, I'd be lying if I didn't say that this movie didn't leave me awestruck every time I saw it. The first time especially. I think we can all remember what it was like to watch our first Smart movie, and this was basically mine. Nothing was really going on in my head other than... And on another watch, it really just made me grow my appreciation for it. So I kind of already had something of a theme discussion going on in the original video, so I'll try to keep this one short. But nonetheless, the themes in this movie are just great. I love how this movie sets up Major and the Puppet Master as being both antithetical and mirrors to each other, because they're both just trying to seek freedom from these metaphorical and physical boundaries that are set upon them, but them being of two completely different mindsets makes it really interesting. Something I picked up on this watch that I didn't really pick up on before was the ideas of like privacy and humanity being touched on in a way that really is kind of terrifying, mostly in the way that it seems to have predicted a lot of the things that are going on in today's society. Back in the 1990s, the introduction of this desolate city that I described as a ghost in the shell within itself, because you expect this utopia and it's this dystopia, the antithetical version of everything you imagined this futuristic city to be. There's almost nobody there, they almost seem like enslaved to the very city they live in. Pretty much one of the biggest questions to come out of Ghost in the Shell for me is how much we're willing to sacrifice for our advancement, and at what point in our advancement do we stop becoming human? The movie makes a good point of asking you, what is life? What do you consider to be life? Because this machine is now a life form. And also vice versa, at what point does something become human? I don't know, I just find this all very interesting, and I can ramble on for hours about how this movie makes me think. And I have before, twitch.tv/thecynicalartist. All these aspects add up to a tantalizing film that only few other films have been able to rival in thematic scope and ambition. One of those films is not Ghost in the Shell 2017. The American live-action adaptation of Ghost in the Shell was released in 2017 to extremely mixed reviews? While many people believe the film to be visually stunning, most agreed that its story left a lot to be desired. Unless you're a YouTube film critic? In which case...
What the f is wrong with critics? That was an awesome movie!
Yeah, it was.
Generally, the movie was met with indifference here in the US, and only made back $40 million of its $110 million budget. It would recoup the rest of that internationally, but I digress. For a franchise with a cult following like Ghost in the Shell, I cannot imagine those were the numbers they were looking for. Seems to me like they were really banking on those Scarlett Johansson giddies to rake in the dough. It's too bad for them that people just felt like they were whitewashing Major instead. Definitely one of the bigger bruh moments of 2017, I dare say. Even though I was really, honestly hoping to find something of substance here in this rewatch, it really just fell more flat on its face on the second watch. Like, I have all these super interesting and well thought out notes about the 1995 movie, but quite genuinely, all the 2017 ones are memes. The glitches, especially the sound effect, are totally... There was some weird scene where they went into a Yakuza club that had some pretty strange connections to Yakuza 0. They even mentioned the villain's name is Kuze. Like, what the f are the odds of that? Major's just such a regarded person of mass intellect in this movie, it hurts. She's so incompetent. It makes me feel better about my impotence. Let's not forget about the dialogue too.
How do you know what's a glitch and what's me?
The glitches have a different texture.
I'm sure I'll be throwing in memes around here somewhere, but just know, no. They tried going for something different here in a way, while also trying to respect the original source material, and the combination of both those worlds are just big doo-doo stinky, man. They don't work.
Fine, I guess you are my little punk champ. Come here.
Now let me remind you here, this movie came out in early 2017. What's funny to me is that later on that very same year, another movie that I think was actually a better Ghost in the Shell movie also came out. You might have heard of it. It's this little movie called Blade Runner 2049. They're not directly same by any means, right? But I think Blade Runner 2049 actually kind of tackles and evolves the themes of the original Ghost in the Shell better than this movie ever did. It's kind of sad when I have to say a movie with little to no connections represents the original movie better than the remake does. Here's one thing I felt like I didn't do a great job of explaining in the original video. How is it fair as a movie in its own right? Well, it's also just very poor. Like I said, writing is bad, the character motivation is bad. I mean, I will give them this, the visuals are pretty nice, but they're kind of pointless to the story. Whereas the original used the city as a means to describe this desolate, grimy, hole. The new one just kind of makes it seem hollow, but unintentionally, especially because the movie's not tackling those same kind of themes. Its themes are more revolved around what happened to her life. It's something that really feels more cliche and like American based, meaning something that we see in these movies all the time. So the city does just kind of become backdressing really. Looks neat, but not really much else to it. The twists are all pretty easy to see coming. The ending does not leave me with much satisfaction at all. The villain, but also not villain of the movie is not very interesting and doesn't serve for a good antithesis to Major. The real villain is underdeveloped and bland. I could go on, really. This movie is just such a slog. To be perfectly honest with you, the first time I saw this movie in theaters, I fell asleep. It just doesn't do a good job at gripping your attention at all. It's like a generic action movie that they decided to slap Ghost in the Shell onto, but with no real sense of direction for either side of the coin. But one thing from the original video I do want to look back on is how I seem to just want the new one to be a direct remake of the old one. Like the same thing, but live action. Only thing is that if this was ever going to be successful in any way, shape, or form, it was going to need to be original. It was going to have to try to be appealing to both fans of the cult classic, as well as interesting to the new Western audience that has no prior connections to it. I mean, I can only think of so few direct live action adaptations that work, even less that somehow manage to surpass the source material. But even a lot of those have the advantage of being not well known, and therefore didn't really have to compete against itself in the same way this movie does. Take Alita Battle Angel for example. I feel like it's fair to say a lot less people were familiar with that source material, so when they walked into this crazy ass Robert Rodriguez movie, it worked. It's not a great movie by any means, but it was still fun and enjoyable, and it felt like an anime live action movie. And while taking things in a different direction didn't necessarily work for this movie, that doesn't mean it hasn't worked elsewhere. So here's where things get interesting enough for me to want to revisit this video in the first place. The manga. The original source material for the 1995 adaptation of Ghost in the Shell is almost nothing like the 1995 adaptation of Ghost in the Shell. While the movie is this bleak yet deep exploration into this futuristic hole, the manga, I'd almost go out of my way to say that the manga is a straight up comedy. Like, this is some dummy funny, dude. This thing had me slapping my knee at scenes like Bato walking in on a hardcore lesbian threesome. Little lesbian. And let's not forget the random panels where some characters literally switch into something they like to call autistic mode. It's pretty apparent to me that this manga is not taking itself anywhere near as seriously as the movie we all know. It feels like more of a spy, espionage, action thriller, like something you'd see The Rock star in, but it doesn't make me want to choke on my own Glock. Not only that, but even the themes are pretty different. Whereas the 1995 movie tackles all these complex existential concepts, the manga is going off in a completely different direction, talking about how funny it was when Bato submitted his will to Allah or something like that. To add on to my surprise, only 4, yes, 4 of the 11 chapters are adapted into this movie, those 4 chapters adding up to be the Puppet Master saga, and even then still being loosely adapted. That being said, the manga is still a pretty great read, and I'd really recommend you go out of your way to read it if you have any interest. It's really fascinating flipping through the pages and seeing how things originally were before Mamoru Oshii. Had it not been for him, it probably would have never blown up the way it did. Even still, I find it more interesting that it was adapted the way it was. The manga was probably never made with the intention of being this highly philosophical brain f***er. Just a funny little futuristic series with some cool art drawn by a guy that genuinely makes hentai for a living. On the other hand, it fits that narrative structure so well once you plug it in there. So, ultimately, what am I trying to say with this? Well, even though I think that the 2017 remake is still pretty bad, I do have to say that I've garnered a little bit more respect for it in trying to be different, as opposed to it just being that direct shot-for-shot remake that it sounded like I wanted it to be. The thing is, I never knew that it was making the same daring attempt, the attempt at originality, that the original movie, now heralded as a masterpiece, did. So, you know what? Keep those 20 gajillion remakes coming. Let the name continue to be present in people's minds so they can go revisit the manga or the movie, and we can keep these interesting discussions about them going. And also let another generation of people be inspired by their craftsmanship and their beauty. Just please try not to make them shit. Hello everyone, like I said, I'm back. Hello, I'm so happy to be here. It's been a year. I know you're tired of hearing that lame excuse, but 2020 has been so stupid. Like, I can remember a time when I was regularly picking up boulders with my kids and I didn't have a care in the world, but this year has just been something else, man. I'm going to hope, and I'm not gonna make any promises, I'm gonna hope to stay on track, making videos again, at a somewhat regular basis. My hope is at least once a month. And keep this going because, you know, it's fun to be behind the camera, even if it does make me want to have an anxiety attack, you know? It's great, it's fun, I'm having a wonderful time. That being said, let's go ahead and chill. Patreon.com/CynicalJustin, go check it out, it's in the description, it's really cool. It's got some cool stuff in there, not really, but you know, if you want to support me, if you want to help me go through this and make more videos, throwing $1 my way even would help me a ton. And you can join the list of cool dudes right over there. Look at that, look at those cool names right over there. Those are some wonderful people. You could be right up there with them. Isn't that something? But hey, you know, that's not the only way to support me. Of course, I've got my Twitter. I think my @ is Cynic Justin, as well as my art Twitter @acynicalartist. And I'm hoping also into the new year that I start getting back into streaming. So if you want to go ahead and talk to me about movies or games or the jelking technique I use, go ahead and check me out at twitch.tv/acynicalartist. Oh, and one last thing before I forget. My friends and I created a new dummy funny channel called Keg. I'd really recommend you go check it out. It's pretty much just us being dumb for 10 or so minutes at a time. Nonetheless, again, thank you all for sticking around to the end of this. I'm gonna go strangle myself because I hate looking at myself in a camera. Hope y'all take care, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye!